Alan Brochstein joins me now, CEO and publisher of 420 Invest. Alan, welcome back.
Hey, good to see you. Happy New Year, right?
Happy New Year and Happy New Decade to you as well. Alan, let's start with an overview of the outlook for the cannabis market globally in 2020.
Yeah, so I think the bad news for this year is it's going to be more back-end loaded. Last year we got off to a great start, if you recall, and I think this year is very different. The capital crunch is really the constraint this year, but we're going to work through that, I think, as the year plays out. And let's start north of the border. I'm a little less excited there, but obviously Ontario will be opening stores as the year rolls out, plus some other improvements in provinces. Maybe we'll get lucky and the vape pen bans will be lifted or amended. And then, of course, Cannabis 2.0 will be rolling out even without a robust vape pen market. And, you know, the edibles are interesting, and I'm not that excited about Cannabis 2.0 from the outset. 10 milligrams per package is kind of a bummer, but south of the border, I'm super excited. And I think a couple of things are really interesting about this year. So first of all, as the year plays out, some of the largest MSOs are going to have monster type numbers. And not only will the revenues dwarf their Canadian counterparts, but the profitability, it's already there and it's going to show up even more. So that's one piece of it. But I think, we already saw some excitement around this Illinois legalization. And I think the traders don't necessarily understand the implications, but we're already seeing it play out. Ever since the new year, when Illinois legalized, it was the first state to legalize through the legislative process. We've seen a few things. First of all, two ballot initiatives. One is for adult use in South Dakota. Well, South Dakota is like a suburb of Ontario, basically. I mean, yeah, of Toronto, so it's not a big deal, but still it would be another state if it were to pass. And then Mississippi, a deep south state, will have a ballot initiative on medical cannabis. So that's exciting, but actually what's really exciting, and this is what I kind of anticipated, James, is New York is back at it, and the governor there, Andrew Cuomo, is talking about resurrecting his efforts to legalize through the legislative process. So I think Illinois is in particular, strong driver because there's so much public company exposure there, and I think it's going to also encourage some nearby states as well as East Coast states to legalize.
Sure. My understanding is that the initiative to get recreational cannabis on the ballot for 2020 in Florida is having some difficulties. Is that going to put a damper on the performance that we've been seeing out of Florida from the Florida-based companies?
Yeah, I don't know. Florida is really tough to handicap. There's a lot of litigation going on, and the caps are going to raise. So I don't really have a confident outlook there on the legal. And I know a lot of people are talking up ballot initiative or maybe even legislative process there, as well as Arizona. And these would be good things. I'm not counting on them, honestly, but I hope it works out. Florida would be incredible, but I'm not counting on it.
Right. When we look at companies like Aurora, who are continuing to diminish in value and sort of exhibit the actions of a drowning sort of man, so to speak, trying to lighten up on assets, abruptly announcing the cessation of construction at its projects in Moose Jaw. I mean, to what extent is Aurora going to be able to service its debt going forward, and to what extent do you think it's really facing existential challenges?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's important to understand this is not just Aurora; it's really across the sector, and it's in the United States as well for some companies. And in the U.S., fortunately, we are seeing some efforts that are being made to improve balance sheets or to give better access to capital. And we've seen a lot of real estate sale-leaseback transactions. And so in Canada, like I said, Aurora is not alone. And I think, it's really easy to look at a financial snapshot and just assume the worst. And I think that's what the market's doing. A lot of these analysts, I do understand, and I read the Piper Bank of America did the same thing. I read them both. And, so people are taking down their revenues for next year. Aurora has a big chunk of debt due in 21. And, just like if somebody came to you, and I don't know if you have a mortgage on your house, but if they said, hey, dude, you got to pay your mortgage back right this minute, well, that might be a problem. So if they give you a year, you can work out. So I think, Auroras, it's not what they want to do, it's what they need to do, obviously, and they've already started that process of cutting back on operating expenses, cutting back on CapEx, divesting assets. Remember, they sold T-God, and they have some other assets. They've had this haphazard M&A strategy. They have a big chunk of Alcanna shares. I would hate to see them sell that for their sake. I think they're really cheap, but there are some ways that they can access capital. And the reality is, if the environment improves, they have more than a year to work out their next debt. So.
Sure. But I'm curious, looking at the whole marketplace for 2020, I agree with you completely that the United States is representative of opportunity, and I think the Canadian market is more representative of risk, just because of the overcapacity in Canada and the slow manifestation of sales that have drastically underperformed expectations. But I think, I don't see anything to get excited about in Canada.
Well, like I said, it's going to be as the year plays out. It's not tomorrow. Cannabis 2.0 will be slow to roll out. You can go to the stores, you can see the high prices and the limited selection right now online. That will get better. If some of these, especially Alberta, were to lift their vape ban, I think that would help a lot. Vapes were going to be the most popular 2.0 product, and it's ridiculous. I understand being conservative, but this is not the right way to handle it. Even in the United States, Massachusetts, which was the only state to implement a vape ban, they ended theirs early because, it's all right to be abundantly cautious at first, but you need to revisit your decision. They revisited it. They ended that vape ban early. It's not the right thing. The black market didn't ban vapes. Why is the licit market going to ban vapes when that's not really the issue? So the issues are better understood, and don't underestimate distribution. And Ontario, that bottleneck there, the lack of distribution there has been detrimental. So as the year plays out, it's going to get better, James. I think you're right, obviously, about potential oversupply, but that's in a market where it's facing severe underdemand, and that's really the issue. The demand is there, but there's no way for it to get channeled into the right spots right now.
Sure, you bet. Alan, to what extent do you think the likelihood that cannabis becomes a federal election issue is going to manifest and impact the whole sector in the U.S. anyways?
I put about a 0% chance on that, but I'm trying to be conservative. So I think what'll be interesting, most interesting, looking out 10, 11 months from now when the elections hit, is all the state initiatives that we'll see. And that traditionally, excites investors potentially, and obviously it's good for the industry. And one of the big differences is nowadays, the publicly traded companies are actually in some of these states. And you mentioned Florida. If they were to be on the ballot for a legal initiative, that would be huge for a whole bunch of public companies. New York, if they were to legalize, and that won't be through the ballot, it would be legislatively, it would be huge. I think 7 out of the 10 license holders there are public. But in terms of like any sort of federal policy changes as a result of the election, this would only happen, and not even necessarily, if we were to get Democratic control of the House and the Senate. And so even if that were to happen, and I know investors would most likely react very favorably to that prospect, this is a very long, arduous process with lots of challenges. And look at how long it's taken Canada to roll out its federal legalization. So I don't think that it's actually going to happen, and if it does, you got a long time to get ready for it, in my opinion.
All right, Alan, we'll leave it there for now. We'll come back to you next week. Thanks very much for joining us, as usual.
All right, take care, James.